Hey, everybody, welcome to Locked On Lakers for Friday. Brian Kamenetzky and Andy Kamenetzky. Dwight Howard is an octopus. We're going to get some thoughts on the Western Conference. Are the Dallas Mavericks good? And what the hell is going on in Minnesota and Philadelphia? Lots to do on Locked On Lakers today.
You are Locked On Lakers, your daily Los Angeles Lakers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Want to let you know that today's show is brought to you by Rock Auto. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts a car will ever need. Visit rockauto.com and tell them that Locked On sent you. So much to talk about today, and to do it, we are welcoming our friend. He's the host of Locked On Mavs. He is the host of the Locked On NBA podcast on Friday. All of that here on the Locked On Network. Nick Angstadt, thanks so much for coming on. We appreciate it. It's good to see you.
Gentlemen, as somebody that grew up as a massive Lakers fan, listening to ESPN LA, it's an honor to be with you guys.
It is. It really is. No, I appreciate that you recognize.
They apparently didn't agree, but
yeah, twice. But that's
they brought us back just to make sure they were correct the first time. Nope, not an honor.
I was funny. Like I was doing. I did a hit with Roger Lodge, who's just an institution in Orange County for people who live out here. He's been on for I think 13, 14 years, like straight. He I was congratulating him for being on for so long, and I compared him to like Wolfgang Puck. He's like, he's an institution. Andy and I are like a very successful food truck. Like we've been at it for a long time.
It's actually a good way of putting
it.
But you do occasionally have to look to see where we're parked.
And all the big events and festivals, right?
Yeah,
but the food truck has yet to go out of business.
It is a successful food truck.
Even if sometimes it's like, where are they in Chatsworth? No, West LA. They're all over.
Check your Instagram and you can find us. So before we get to the Lakers, your thoughts on Westbrook and everything that they've done and whether they're going to win a title and all that. But before we start, so Dwight Howard on Wednesday's episode of The Masked Singer was the first voted off the island. He is the giant purple octopus or whatever. He did a rendition of Tutti Frutti and didn't win apparently. Can we all agree? Like everybody's saying, like he was actually pretty good. Like I was impressed with how good Dwight's singing was on the show.
Dwight Howard, the consummate entertainer, like always doing stuff, being goofy, wanted to joke around, finally got to be himself, it feels like, right? Like finally got to be, I'm going to put a mask on, not worry about what people think about me and just go out and do what I want to do. Good for him, man. I was excited for him. That run in Los Angeles was just the first one, at least, was just such a beat down on his like fun-loving attitude. It felt like.
Well, Andy, that's exactly what I thought of. Like when it was revealed, like, oh my God, had Dwight done this in 2012, there is literally no event that would have gotten the city to burn.
This is what he looked like, by the way, folks. This is Dwight Howard as the octopus.
That is purple, right? I'm also colorblind.
It's like different shades of purple. He honestly, like, he looks like a cross between like Joseph in the Technicolor Dreamcoat, like Jim Carrey's character in The Mask, and a pimp. As an octopus.
And the guy from Princess and the Frog, that the
a little bit of that, yeah. But that is definitely an octopus. Like if octopi were pimps, that would be the hat they would wear. There's no question about it.
Yeah, octopimps.
The magenta coat and then like the pink like tentacles on the head. Yeah,
there's a lot going on.
He's a purple octopus with wearing a purple, like a purplish pinkish suit with a furry purple collar, like huge furry purple collar, and then tentacles.
Yeah, we can't see his shoes to see if they got goldfish in them. But like I saw that coming across Twitter last night, Andy, and the thought that absolutely came to my mind was, oh my God, if this had happened in 2012 in Dwight's first run here, the city would have burned down. Like no sentence gets this place to burn faster than Dwight Howard is the singing octopus.
Well, I don't know if the city would have burned down because it wouldn't have been necessary since Kobe would have already murdered him before anything could have been done. Like that is the thing that would have just set that tension over the edge. Like Kobe is just, he's winding down from a 14-hour workout, right after a game, like on the heels of a game. Kobe's worked out for 14 hours and he's ready to, retire and go sleep upside down like a bat as he does in a cryogenic
for 47 seconds.
Right.
While he's also writing like a musical or like
right before starting the day anew. And he just decides to casually flip some channels and he sees his teammate Dwight Howard that he can't stand on national TV dressed as an octopus. And he says, you know what? I'm going to murder him. I'm going to learn what this all was later, but I'm going to kill him.
And Nick, nobody would have prosecuted him, right? Like there's not he would just like, the attorney general's like, look, I know what the law says, but there's not a jury of his peers that's going to convict here. Like nobody's going to, like, he would have just gotten off scot-free.
Especially if it was a judge in Los Angeles, they would have understood. They would have been like, he probably should have not been doing that.
I think Kobe would have been smart enough to wait to commit this murder in Los Angeles. Like he would not have done it on the road.
Or he would have been another masked individual where they just couldn't tell who he was. And
I think Kobe would have wanted everybody to know exactly who did it.
That's a very different show.
I don't think he would have wanted any ambiguity.
The Masked Murderer is a very different show.
By the way, Nick, as a Mavericks guy, how jealous are you that we now with the Lakers have had Dwight thrice? You guys have not even had him once, and you went after him hard.
The Mavs tried really hard. I don't know if you remember. Go look up Dwight Howard comics. There was an incredible pitch for Dwight Howard to come to the Mavericks with. And also Carmelo Anthony. And also you got DeAndre Jordan, who the Mavericks did have once, but tried in 2015, if you remember, and it did not go over well in the house with Blake Griffin in the door and everything. So yeah, and Rondo, who was with the Mavericks, did not work out at all.
No.
And so now there's all these players that the Mavericks tried to get that now in their twilight years, the Lakers have.
I'm really starting to dig some of like the way that every old person in who's ever been connected to the NBA is leaning into, I might try to work out for the Lakers. Like Monte Ellis is now like a rumor, which sure, I'm on board. Like, why not?
Monte Ellis hasn't played NBA basketball since 2017. Like, think about the things we were doing in 2017. Like, I didn't even host Locked On Mavs, and I've done it for 5 years now.
No, I mean, it's one way to make you feel good about the Fareed workouts.
But him too, Nick Collison, Darren Collison. I mean, all these
Nick
guys.
Collison
Nick
too.
Collison.
Yeah.
Why not?
Why not? It's amazing to me.
I'm ready for Joe Johnson, right? Like, I'm just ready for Joe Johnson on the Lakers. He's trying to make a comeback. There's been rumors about it. He's been the MVP in the Big Three. He can still make a shot.
Crushing the Big Three.
Let's go.
Crushing the Big Three.
Bring him on.
And he would not do that much to affect the overall age of the team. Okay, so Carmelo Anthony made the 900-year-old grandma joke and all these other things, and the Lakers are obviously kind of as a team sort of leaning into this a little bit. The doubters and the haters and all that. How much do you think the age actually matters? Because in some ways it does, and in some ways, to me, it doesn't.
Yeah, it's fascinating because there's multiple things. They have so much experience. Like, okay, is too much experience a good thing? Probably not, right? With the Mavericks, we're looking for, can we get one guy that's been in the NBA 10 years? Like the most tenured, I think Maverick is now like Dwight Powell, I think is probably the most, or maybe Boban is the oldest, I think. And so now we're like, can we just get one guy to come in and be that guy? But now the Lakers have how many guys? Like 7, 8 guys that have been in the NBA 10 plus years. And Kent Bazemore and Anthony Davis are close to that as well. So is too much experience a bad thing? Probably not. But then you look at, all right, if a couple of these guys go down to injury, and as you get later in your career, that can be easier and easier, then all of a sudden does that depth like completely get affected by, these guys? It takes them longer to come back from injuries, and they're more susceptible to injuries. And so I feel like that's where it matters more than just the on-the-court stuff. Because we know like these guys can still play. That's why they're still in the league.
We will ask you now the obligatory, what do you think of the Russell Westbrook acquisition? Because obviously that was the big thing for the offseason for the Lakers, but also, his entry and his fit with everything, is going to, I think, determine how this season goes, maybe more than any single factor.
Right. It defines every other question that you ask is all centered around, first and foremost, what do you think of Russ?
It's a big swing. it's a real big swing because it can go very poorly. It went kind of poorly for the Rockets. The Lakers were sort of at the other end of that, where they made it go poorly for them a little bit. But the Lakers were the team that was backing off of Russell Westbrook and saying, shoot, go ahead, shoot in the playoffs. Like, we will let you shoot whatever shot you want. Go ahead, take the jumpers. And so now this is the ultimate test maybe of, can LeBron turn this player into a viable blah, 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 viable title player, viable, starting point guard on a, title team. Basically that's the end of it. So you're betting a lot on LeBron again. And it's a great move for the regular season. Everybody's made that point, right? It's a great move for the regular season. He's going to eat up a lot of minutes. It's essentially the mantra, what you hoped Montrezl Harrell was going to be, right, in the regular season. Which,
by the way, he did. I mean, Montrez did fine in the regular season. He did what he was supposed to.
Yeah, it's that type of a role for him. But you need him to do more. He's making $40 million. Like they've invested a lot into this Russell Westbrook situation, and so. Yeah, I don't know if they have enough shooting around him to be able to make it work. They tried. They added a bunch of dudes that can shoot. So hopefully, as a personal guy that grew up as a Lakers fan, born in Southern California, I hope it works out a lot. But if they play the Mavs, it may not be.
How much crap do you get for that? I mean,
my co-host Isaac Harris on Locked On Mavericks may hate the Lakers more than he likes the Mavericks or likes anything. And so it's a daily basis it comes down. But hey, it's, can't help where you were born, and then where you went to school, and all that kind of stuff.
So we need to find out what's going on with Dallas, because I think the Mavs might be as polarizing a Western Conference team as is out there. How much of a contender are they? Are they enough even to contend with the Lakers? We will ask Nick that question next.
Locked On Lakers brought to you by Built Bar, the best tasting protein bar ever. Bars covered in 100% chocolate. They are soft. They are easy to chew. I'm not going to call out the ones that you can't chew by name, but you know who they are. They're deadbeats. They require like an entire construction crew just to get through that bar. But that is not the case with Built Bar. They are healthy. They're great for health-conscious people. If you're trying to lose or maintain weight, they are low sugar. They're low calorie. They're high protein. They're high fiber. They're great for the keto crowd, and they taste delicious. As always, you got the 12 original flavors like raspberry, coconut almond, salted caramel, banana bread, new flavors, including cherry Barcia. Cherry
Barcia is actually a little too on the nose and gross and cannibalistic.
Lemon almond cheesecake, cookies and cream, perfect for someone like me who loves basically every taste on the planet.
And human flesh. Right.
No, maybe not Jerry Garcia. That might be. Although I will say this.
Let's be perfectly honest. He's been gone a long time. I'm not sure literally how much meat's left on.
I don't know, man. You eat the Jerry Garcia, you are in for an experience.
That's true.
You better lock yourself out about 10 to 12 hours to be occupied mentally. You know what I'm saying? Drugs. Go to BuiltBar.com. Use promo code LOCK15. You get 15% off your first order. Again, promo code LOCK15. 15% off at BuiltBar.com. And we just lost
the network. Right. Apologies to the network. After losing Sweat Block last week, we now have lost Built Bar. So we've talked about this with a lot of people, Nick, and
hard to believe times were turbulent at ESPN.
They let you go twice. Can't
the
imagine
food
why.
truck tire may be flat now.
The marketing department slashed them.
AAA is not coming to fix the tire.
So, most people who look at the NBA, look at the offseason, whether kind of have the Lakers up if everything works the way it's supposed to, probably a little bit better than everybody else, especially in the playoffs. People throw in Utah, they throw in Phoenix, and then after that, there's a lot of speculation. Golden State. Well, how healthy is Clay going to be? It starts there. Dallas, though, is a team that people love to put their finger on as like, watch those guys. They could make the big leap and make the challenge. And I'm not saying they're going to suck. I mean, they could win 50 games. But can you explain to me why they're poised to go from what they were last year to something more than what they were last year, despite the fact that the team seems pretty similar to what it was?
It's just this guy. It's Luka Doncic, right? Like that's the reason why people are high on him. He's become, is this sacrilegious to say this on a Lakers podcast? He's the best offensive player in the NBA. I mean, he has become a guy that is an offensive engine in and of himself. He has done more.
It's fine to say, Nick, our guy plays defense.
Luka got a defensive player of the year vote. It may have not been a legitimate one, but it was a defensive player of the year vote.
Has anybody actually dug in to figure out where that came from?
Greg Logan. He writes for like a SYN in New York or something like that. But yeah, it's a long time bit on Locked On Mavs.
It would explain why he hasn't
Greg
seen
Logan.
Luka.
But it's just a respect for Luka Doncic. Whether you agree with me that he's the best offensive player or not, he has become a player.
He's great.
I think that's absolutely a fair statement. He's not the best player in the league, but as an offensive player, I would think
as a generator of offense,
who's better?
He is up there with anybody.
Yeah, and he can take this team to wherever they want. Like he took that Clippers team at full strength to 7 games, and it took a Kawhi Leonard 50-point game for them for the Clippers to win that series, and then then they get injured and all that stuff. But it's just about that. And so for the Mavericks, you look at this team and you're like, okay, they did get a little bit better. I reserve that they got probably 10% better players wise. They added Reggie Bullock, that's more shooting. They replaced JJ Redick. They replaced Josh Richardson, who was just a big negative for the Mavericks. Like he should have fit in everything he does. It should have worked. It should have been that upgrade for a defensive guard to pair next to Luka. It just didn't work. There are so many other reasons. He was out with COVID. He struggled in the beginning of the season just to hit a jumper, like all that kind of stuff. But Reggie Bullock should be an upgrade there. They also bring in Sterling Brown. That's some more depth. And Kristaps Porzingis, this has been a bit on Locked On Mavs too. Take a drink. First healthy offseason of his career with the Mavericks. I mean, Cuban has said this, Nico Harrison has said this, Jason Kidd has said this, but it's true. And he's coming into the season hopefully in better shape than he's ever been, getting to work on skills and getting to work on conditioning instead of just rehabbing every single year. And so that's the reason why people are high on them, is they got a little bit better, and Luka is just incredible.
What does a healthy Porzingis mean though? Because even you talk about trying things, Richardson. I mean, Dallas has had a history of trying a lot of stuff over the last few years and never quite working. And Porzingis is a huge part of that. And whether he's healthy or not healthy, the fit there, talk about Westbrook and the Lakers, but the fit with Porzingis and Dallas hasn't really been smooth. What changes this year, even if he's healthier?
Yeah. So Porzingis, he gets a lot of flack because of what he became and what his role was asked to be, what they asked him to do in the playoffs. He played against this Clippers team who have all these wing defenders, like so many guys that can defend him. And Porzingis is bad against wing defenders. So it just made him look his absolute worst. But in the regular season and against pretty much any other team that doesn't have excess wing defenders to lend to him, he's a 20-point per game scorer still. Both seasons in Dallas, he's been a 20-point per game scorer, and he spreads the floor in a way when he's playing the 5. He spreads the floor in a way that gives Luka so much space. This is why you see Luka. He was one of the top players in scoring in the paint a couple years ago because just the amount of space that Porzingis gives him, and so having him out there. Where he struggled the most was on defense, but offensively, he's giving you a lot, and he's giving you enough to make the Mavericks one of the best offensive teams in the league. But the defensive side of the ball is where they're going to struggle, and that's what they ran into in the playoffs, and why his stock has now dropped so far because people have just looked at those 2 series against the Clippers and said, "Man, well, this guy can't play."
What's your thoughts on Jason Kidd taking over as head coach? You may have noticed his entries into head coaching, or sometimes even just being linked to a team. I won't say which one, but that ended up hiring Frank Vogel instead of him, with Kidd over his shoulder. There's been controversy, Nick, swirling around Jason Kidd wherever he goes in the coaching ranks.
Yeah, I hadn't noticed. I hadn't noticed anything. The Jason Kidd and Kristaps Porzingis is still a big question mark for sure. Like that one, I just explained what he brings, but he is still a big question mark for this team. Jason Kidd is obviously the other huge question mark for this team because you go from Rick Carlisle, who had kind of worn out his welcome in Dallas. People were getting tired of him. People were sick of, Rick just being Rick, essentially, at the end of the day. But is Jason Kidd a better coach than Rick Carlisle? No, I don't think that there's any case for him to be. He would have to have grown a lot since we last saw him coach a team in Milwaukee. Were those 2 years in LA when he was assistant and he was working under Frank Vogel, and he learned, from coaching LeBron, coaching Anthony Davis, did he learn enough in those 2 years to become a much better NBA coach? That's the bet that Mark Cuban, Nico Harrison, and the Mavericks are making. And I hope so, but I'm concerned about it. And there's a lot of other questions, about Kidd off the court. I'm sure that you guys have gone through and talked about with the Mavericks. It hits a little bit different because they went through all the stuff that they went through 2 years ago with the sexual harassment, the all that kind of stuff with the Sports Illustrated article that came out. There's another layer on that with Jason Kidd.
Were you surprised along those lines that they ended up hiring him? Because the Lakers, it was obvious, wanted to hire Jason Kidd after Luke Walton, but felt that the optics, they just couldn't do it. And they went through this weird thing where they were requiring him to be on the staff of anybody they hired, like basically trying to sneak Jason Kidd in through the back door, which is impossible to do. But like, it was clear that they were not comfortable with this and somehow decided that they could live with paying him, but just not
hire him
in
as
that
assistant,
job
as the guy who you could use just in case it doesn't work with the guy that you do hire, but hiring him just straight away wouldn't be good.
Right. But the Lakers didn't have, Nick, before I let you go, just the same context with what was going on within their organization as Dallas does.
Completely. Exactly. I had people, obviously I just said that I grew up a Lakers fan. And so our listeners know that I'm a Lakers fan. They say, well, Kidd was hired for the Lakers. Did you make a big deal about it then? I was like, well, I don't have a Lakers podcast, but, with Jason Kidd, the Mavs sort of kind of did the same thing. They're like, okay, well, it was reported that Nico and Jason Kidd were a package deal and they were both going to come together. So if you wanted Nico Harrison, you were going to get Jason Kidd. So he was kind of brought in that way too, in the back door. So yeah, I was surprised. There's one factor in all of this that I don't think it's mentioned enough because I don't think people outside of Dallas know this or understand this. When all the stuff happened with the Mavericks, with the SI article, Mark Cuban goes on the jump and he's, crying and talking about how we're going to fix this. He did bring in Sint Marshall, who was, really high up in AT&T and now got brought in basically to be the fixer, to be the person that sort of fixed the culture and fixed the Dallas Mavericks on the business side and all that kind of stuff. And she has become the person that is sort of the moral compass of this organization. She met with Jason Kidd beforehand. They sat down, they talked, and she said that she's the one that kind of vetted him and walked him through his past and walked him through the domestic violence and walked him through the DUI stuff and walked him through all that kind of stuff to see where he was at now compared to where he was before. And she gave her stamp of approval. And so that's what we're basing it on. All right, her acceptance is now the Mavericks' acceptance for him as a coach. And, take that as you will. Some people say that's not enough. Some people say that I trust Sint Marshall, and I personally trust Sint Marshall, but I still would not make the choice because of a bunch of other reasons, because I'm not sure he's the best coach or was the best option to begin with. So,
what do you think of the Nico? Because like the front office, you talk about it, like is also been, there's been a lot of churn there too. It was Thursday. Bob Voulgaris was, I guess, not renewed. Not terribly surprising if you've been following
kicked
the news
to the
over
curb,
there.
Brian. He was kicked to him and his calculator,
his analytics curb. And so, but like Nico Harrison is an unconventional hire as GM. And, it's a little bit like what the Lakers did with Rob Pelinka in that sense. What is expected to be different? How do you think this moves them into sort of a more stable era, and hopefully one for Mavericks fans, at least, it's a little more prosperous in terms of actually winning, winning big things as opposed to being on the edge of it.
Yeah, the stability of it is actually different now. The Mavericks haven't made a change at GM. I mean, Donnie Nelson's been there forever. Were you guys covering the NBA when Donnie Nelson wasn't in charge of the Mavericks?
We actually go far enough back that we once did a magazine assignment for ESPN The Magazine involving the Mavericks, and Don Nelson was the coach at the time.
Yeah, he's been around the Mavericks for like 23 years or something like that, and so he's been in and around. Rick Carlisle was the coach for 13 years, so now the Mavericks were looked at as this stable franchise, but eventually that stuff just it wears out, and Donnie Nelson wasn't the best talent evaluator anymore. He didn't get the best deals and all that kind of stuff. The Porzingis deal was by and large a good one, but there's all kinds of different moves around the edges that they just weren't capitalizing on. And so now you bring in Nico Harrison, and the way the Mavericks are pitching it, it's all about relationships. It's just like Bob Myers. It's just like, Leon Rose. It's just like Rob Pelinka, like you just said. He has relationships with everybody across the league. Everybody wants Nikes. Everybody wants to get signed by Nike. And so he's been kind of scouting players since high school, and he was Kobe's like right-hand man for a while for Nike and all that kind of stuff. And so they're making this big bet on him. And it's a big swing. It's also sort of giving Mark Cuban a little bit more power, I think, in terms of player evaluation and player. He's sort of moved. I don't want to say that. I don't want to say it's kind of moved into like a Jerry Jones sort of situation
Well,
where
that
he's going to be
works
part of the
well.
brain trust.
This
It's going to be
exciting news for Lakers fans because whenever the owner,
as much as Mavs fans love the Westbrook thing, I'm sure Lakers fans love this whole thing with Cuban.
If there is a takeaway that is going to make Lakers fans happy out of this, is that Mark Cuban is deeply involving himself in player evaluation. That is excellent news.
Mark Cuban has said over and over again that Nico Harrison is in charge. Like Nico Harrison has that, but Mark Cuban's gonna have the final say, and so we know how that goes. I mean, you've seen owners.
The aggregators are going to be out for that one. All right, let's look around the rest of the league here, because the Ben Simmons thing, first and foremost, has been kind of a shockwaves deal. Like Andrew Wiggins in Golden State refusing his vaccine, which may keep him out of home games. And Minnesota's changing its GM again. So a lot happening, but let's start with Ben Simmons. We'll do that next.
Locked On Lakers brought to you by Rock Auto. With the ever-increasing numbers of makes and models out there, it is impossible to stock all the parts you would need in a traditional chain storefront. And why would you spend 30%, 50%, 100% more for the exact same auto parts at a chain store or new car dealership anyway? Dummy, you rube, you mark. You can get it for far less at rockauto.com. For example, a Honda Odyssey fuel pump, $353 from a chain store. It's only $216 from Rock Auto. They're a family business. They've been serving auto part customers online for 20 years. So go to rockauto.com right now. See all the parts available for your car or truck. Right, Locked On in the How Did You Hear About Us box, so they know we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. rockauto.com.
Locked On Lakers also brought to you by betonline.ag. It's back. It's better than ever. Football. All eyes are on the gridiron. Teams are back. We're into week 3 already of the NFL season, week something or other, the college season. It's a different calendar. I can't be expected to keep track. As always, BetOnline is your number one spot for all the pro and college football action this season, with new updated sites, new updated site and interfaces, even more odds, props, contests. betonline.ag continues to be the number one source you need for everything football. So head on over to the website, use your mobile device to sign up today to receive your 100% welcome bonus. That's double your initial deposit just for signing up. Don't forget to use the promo code NFL100 in doing it. Football, basketball, boxing, right down to your favorite Vegas casino games. Take advantage of all the amazing offers available for the 2021 season. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet on all your sports favorites. BetOnline, your online sportsbook experts. So one of the things that, like fans always try to think about it with things that don't directly impact their team, like Ben Simmons, is like, what's it going to mean when it actually happens? Like right now, Ben Simmons is not going to play for Philadelphia. We don't know where he's going to land. The ripple effects of this, to me, Nick, are like impossible to predict. I can't figure out where this resolves itself, especially if you're trying to figure out where Ben Simmons could actually land.
Yeah, it's just one of those things to me where I'm like, can it just happen already? I mean, everybody's just sitting like, what's going to change between now and when the season starts? Because he's going to get traded before the season starts, right? Are they going to roll into this? They're going to roll into the season without Ben Simmons?
Who? Like, where can you trade Ben Simmons? You can't trade him to a team that's just going to throw picks at you because, well, you can, but you don't want to because
they can do that. Crazier things.
They're trying to win a title. It's going to be some team that comes out of nowhere, like the Hawks are going to trade for him and send stuff to him, and you're like, oh, didn't see that coming, and it's just going to some owner is going to want to make a big splash. The Minnesota thing, like we were going to talk about them, but they seem to be the prime team to make a move like that, but they just made the change in leadership, so that maybe takes them off the board. But maybe a new guy comes in quickly, and then he's like, I want to make a big splash right away. Especially they have some new ownership and all that. They may want to do something like that.
Well, what's interesting, I mean, underscoring what Brian just said, like in terms of trying to figure out the NBA landscape and the ripple effect from wherever Simmons ends up going, 2 of the teams, if not the 2 teams that I've been seeing Simmons connected to most are either Minnesota or Golden State. And the ramifications from those 2 teams are really different. Like if he goes to the Wolves become better, but they're not going to be in a title race. It's just maybe their odds of actually getting into the playoffs become incrementally better. If
you're really upset if you're Portland there, Andy, right? Like because like their spot is threatened.
Right. But if he goes to say Golden State and they manage to do that without giving up any of their big 3, and you've got Ben Simmons in there as somebody who can take Steph off the ball, some set him up for shots, increase their defense. That's a really different thing. And, Portland is somewhere in between all that, but it's just going to be really interesting to figure out exactly how this affects the league, because with somebody like Simmons, that is on top of everything difficult to figure out what team does he even work best for. This was a really interesting way of putting it. I was listening to The Right Time, Bomani Jones's podcast, and he had Vinny Goodwill on as a guest. And he, I thought, summarized Ben Simmons really well. He could theoretically be the best player on a team if you situated everything around him perfectly, with just tons and tons of shooting, maybe a focal point in the middle that was mobile, something like that. But in theory, he could be your best player. He absolutely could be your third best player. What he can't be is your second best player. And that was a really interesting way of looking at it that I hadn't thought about before. But it speaks to just, Nick, how complicated it is just to figure out where he would even make sense.
Well, and then once he does go to a team, let's say he does go to Golden State, does it changes stuff for the regular season? Sure, maybe that makes him a better team. They have another viable player to push him up. They have obviously a better defensive player. They were a good defensive team last year. Maybe they elevate even more. But in the playoffs, like a lot of Mavs fans are saying, well, what if we trade Porzingis for him? I'm like, okay, you take one player that is flawed in one way, trade him for another player that's flawed in another way, and neither of them have performed really well in the playoffs. And so does that really change a lot for your team? Does it really?
Well, it depends though. With Golden State though, I don't think it necessarily changes. Assuming Klay is okay, because a lot of this hinges on Klay Thompson's health. But assuming Klay is okay and Steph is obviously Steph, I don't know how much would actually change in the playoffs for Golden State, because you're not going to be looking for Ben Simmons to shoot in the regular season or in the playoffs, and the need isn't the same. Whereas like with Philly, it felt like there may have been more of a need for him to actually do that, unless you're really going to relegate him behind Tobias Harris. But there was a lot of pecking order stuff that would make it so he wasn't that guy.
Right. And with Golden State, just to add on what Andy's saying, like you could then put out a lineup. Well, there's the worry like Draymond and Simmons are two. Well, okay, it's Draymond and Simmons, sure, surrounded by probably Steph, Klay, and Otto Porter if he's healthy. Like that's plenty of shooting and plenty of defense and a lot going on. I would not want to have to defend that lineup.
It's a lot going on. I do think they are looking for somebody else to make a shot. Now, maybe, like you said, Klay comes back and he becomes that guy, but the Draymond Green, Ben Simmons as a lineup, that may, like, for all the spacing that Steph and Klay bring, does that just equalize? Like, does that just equalize their normal spacing team now?
But Simmons causes a lot of trouble for teams on the move, and he's not. That's the thing. It's like Andy was touching on it. Like he is the playoff problems and not shooting at the basket and all that kind of stuff. We saw all that, but like it's also easy to overcompensate. Like the guy's terrible. You can't win with him. It's all this like. Yeah, you absolutely can. It's Rudy Gobert. It's Russell Westbrook. It's like there are players in the league who are obviously elite, but also have flaws that need to be acknowledged and compensated for. But if you can do that, you're not getting a crap player in Ben Simmons, who, it's not trading for John Wall at that contract. Not that he's just diminished. He can't possibly perform at that level.
It's not trading for Chandler Parsons, right?
In fairness, so handsome though. That was a very easy mistake.
The recruiter.
I do feel like the Warriors are kind of looking for somebody else to make their own shot. At least they maybe, like you said, Klay comes back and he becomes that guy. But
if by the way they do trade for him, Andy, I know you tweeted about this. It's brilliant tampering, because it's reverse tampering, where you tank the asset. And then now you can, like, when they trade him for a package that is centered around Nico Mannion, we will all know what Joe Lacob was up to.
I think Nico Mannion's out of the league. I don't think
is it not. He won't be after this. They brought him back just for it.
Yeah, he'll be their Aaron McKee. They bring him back in just to do a trade.
Wasn't Aaron McKee starting for the Lakers at one point?
No, he never stayed healthy enough to actually start. He was brought in. He never played. This is what people forget. Basically. Like the Smush Parker thing, and Smush for all the faults that he had. The reality is his first season with the Lakers was way way better than anybody expected. Smush was also not brought in to start. He was brought in to be like a second or third string point guard. Aaron McKee, who actually was brought in to start, couldn't stay on the court, so they had no choice but to go to Smush. Okay, we touched on this a little bit before, but the Wolves are connected to Ben Simmons, and that situation is a mess. One of the things, though, that jumped out at me that was so fascinating about this, that goes back to the Lakers, but you could understand this as the Mavericks, as a team that's had to address its own culture, and the revelations that Gerson Rosas was having a relationship with a subordinate, which obviously is presumably a subordinate. I mean, there aren't many people in the organization that would have been above him. So it got me thinking, and I don't mean this as a shot at either person I'm about to bring up, but just a reminder of how much stuff has changed in the way we look at things culturally. What went on with Phil Jackson and Jeannie Buss would never fly now. Like the idea of the coach dating the owner, that would absolutely never fly again. That
happened. They started that relationship she wasn't the owner, like the odds-on owner, like at the time when he got.
She was not the big boss, but she was an owner. She ran a business.
I think she did have legally a piece of it. You're right. I don't know technically what the legal arrangement was from Doc, but she was certainly, it was very clear where ownership flowed.
And it's kind of different it's different when the person in power is a female as well.
Yeah.
Right? Like people look at it differently. And and then Phil Jackson always seemed like he was a bigger figure and more like of an adult, or like more, you know what I mean? Like he seemed like he was a bigger.
Well, I was about to say, like,
I think
the thing about this is like the power. I mean, you go back to the Clinton thing, like the way that would be covered now wouldn't be a sex scandal; it'd be a power scandal, and rightly so. Mm. The president of the United States having an affair with an intern, like the power dynamic there is so far out of. It's almost impossible to think of something where the dynamic is that far out of whack, and he would have been rightly impeached for that. And that's how that would have played out today, as opposed to something, oh my God, the president had an affair with the dress and all of that. The power dynamic with the Lakers was so interesting. It's like you say, Nick, Phil Jackson was seen as powerful as any person, certainly in the organization, perhaps
ran Jerry West out.
Yeah, I mean, technically subordinate to Jerry West, and it gets to, like, sometimes I think sort of the odd place that sports plays in these things, because the players who are technically employees often have power that the agents have, but in why it is so important to draw these lines and make sure that they are clear and make sure that they are followed, because otherwise the potential for abuse there is very strong.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And it's just become, just define what it is and be appropriate in the situations you are, right? Like, and I think with the Rosas thing, I think he was married as well, and so it was that kind of stuff. And
apparently it wasn't doing his job very well.
Yeah, right. And the Timberwolves say the reason why they got rid of him was for performance reasons, and then also this affair thing did not help his cause, basically, to stick around for a while.
Well, I think the affair, it seemed like, as more reporting has come out, that the affair is what really brought the immediacy to it. Like we finally now have reached a place where this has to happen.
Got to be done.
Right.
How big of a thing do you think? We'll let you go after this. The Wiggins anti-vax thing, not just him particularly, that has a massive impact. I ultimately think he will get a shot, rather than give up home game checks for the rest of his career. I don't know, but the role of COVID and vaccination, where I suspect it's going to be, by the time we're into the season, it's going to look a lot like the NFL, where the overwhelming majority of players are vaccinated, and and you get to take advantage of the less strict protocols and things like that. That's my assumption, but Wiggins is showing that it may not be totally true.
Well, I think the reason why the Wiggins story is so big is we haven't heard many players that aren't getting vaccinated or are against getting vaccinated. It's few and far between, and so it'll be really interesting. Yeah, like you said, to see who is not on those protocols. And I think us that follow the team every single day, I think we'll be able to tell which ones aren't, which ones are, because of, are they at a practice, or are they at a thing, or are they going through other protocols? Like, I think that will be pretty well known to us that cover the team really closely. So it's going to be fascinating, because can he play in like New York or in California?
He can play. I think you can play in New York, but he can't play in San Francisco.
Yeah, so that's fascinating. And
so for the one game they play in New York that year, he'll be fine. But, Andy, but I was just going to ask you, Andy, like the NBA is, I think, clearly looking to try to model themselves after what the NFL is doing, which is we are not going to make accommodations to you or your team based on COVID this year, which isn't to say that COVID won't have an impact. Guys will still have to sit out games. They'll test positive. There'll be breakthrough cases and so on. But the league is not screwing around here. They're not going to interrupt their schedule anymore.
No, I mean, your life as an unvaccinated player, like ultimately there's not going to be a mandate for a variety of reasons, but your life as your life as an unvaccinated player is going to be difficult and unpleasant. And that is the point. Like you are entitled to make what I mean, speaking for myself, I think without very, very specific context is a bad decision. And I think in a lot of ways it's a selfish decision. You can still make that decision, but there's going to be a price that you pay for it, if not economically, certainly in terms of lifestyle and convenience. And it's a case of negative incentives. And we've reached a place now. I mean, this just isn't in sports. In sports, I think this is societally as well, where negative incentives may be the only way and the most effective way that you get the majority of people vaccinated, because just about everything else has been tried. And for something like the NBA, where there are a lot of different trains involved in order to keep all the trains running, and COVID can put a real wrench in that work. So they don't really have another choice in this other than to make it very, very unpleasant for those who just choose not to do this. Like, this is just a choice.
If free Krispy Kreme couldn't get people to get vaccinated, I mean, what else? Like,
no, if you can have all the ladies you want in your hotel room, couldn't get everybody vaccinated. Yeah, the protocols and so. But
I just to have sex, guys. That's not enough.
I do think though your point though, Nick,
I got my sweat block.
Your point though, Nick, is a good one. Keep those. You don't want to get the Built Bars out. Don't be weighed down. But your point though, that the Wiggins story seems to be such an exception. And also too that it happens to be one of the two teams, or one of the not two teams, but one of the teams in which the state that they play in makes home games problematic. I take that as a good sign. All right, Nick Angstadt. Go listen to him at Locked On Mavs. You can listen to him today on Locked On, the Locked On NBA podcast, which you should be tuning into all the time anyway. This was fun. Thanks for doing it. I'm sure we will do it again between now and the seasons and the preview games and the playoffs and all this stuff. I don't think this is gonna be the last of you.
Oh, absolutely. Anytime, guys.